Hello, today we'll journey back in time to the Soviet Union between 1970 and 1990 to explore a notorious serial killer. Over 12 years, he committed over 50 murders using extremely brutal and savage methods, often evading the police. He was considered the Jack the Ripper of Russia, and because most of his crimes occurred in Rostov, he was dubbed the Rostov Butcher. The story begins in Rostov, a region near Ukraine, where the beautiful Don River flows. The fertile land is rich in agriculture and livestock. On Sunday, December 24, 1978, around 1:00 p.m. in Shakhty, Rostov Oblast, a man walking along the Grushevka River noticed a floating object. Thinking it was a drowning person, he approached and discovered it was a body. Terrified, he reported it to the police. Police retrieved the body of a young girl. Her head was covered with a scarf, and her body bore multiple wounds. It was clearly murder, and the killer had disposed of the body in the river. Police secured the scene and investigated. About 150 meters upstream, they found a satchel containing books and a notebook with the name Zakatnova Yelena. Yelena's parents identified the body as their 9-year-old daughter, missing for 2 days. She had left for school that morning and never returned. The scarf was hers. An autopsy revealed she died on December 22, and 2 days before the body was found. The autopsy, completed around 6:00 p.m. that day, determined the cause of death was strangulation. However, besides the strangulation marks, there were other wounds: stab wounds to her right eye socket and abdomen, 3 wounds and lacerations to her genitals and rectum, indicating sexual assault before death. Police investigated those living near the river, focusing on 2 suspects. The first was Andrei Chikatilo, 42. Witnesses reported seeing Yelena talking to a tall man at a nearby bus stop 2 days prior. Another neighbor saw lights on in Chikatilo's wooden house around 7:00 p.m. that day, unusual for him. Police questioned Chikatilo, who denied involvement, claiming he rarely went to the wooden house and only briefly visited to tidy up before leaving. Lacking evidence, they released him. The second suspect was Alexander Kravchenko, 25. 8 years earlier, while drunk, Kravchenko had assaulted and strangled a 10-year-old girl, gouging out her eyes. He buried her body in his garden. The crime was discovered, but due to being a juvenile offender, he received a 15-year sentence. Released after 6 years, he worked in construction in Shakhty. His proximity to the crime scene and his past made him a suspect. However, Kravchenko claimed he spent the evening of December 22 and at a friend's house paying a debt. The friend corroborated this, stating Kravchenko arrived around 6:00 p.m. to pay for a radio. Kravchenko added that they talked for another 15 minutes after the payment. His wife confirmed his return home at 6:15 p.m. With this testimony and lack of evidence, police released him. Later, a new suspect emerged, Grigoriev, 50. On the night of December 31 est, while on night duty at a guard post, Grigoriev boasted to colleagues, while drunk, that he had strangled the girl mentioned in the news. His colleagues dismissed it as drunken boasting. However, rumors spread and police questioned Grigoriev, who denied it, claiming drunken ramblings. No evidence linked him to the crime. A few days later, Grigoriev committed suicide. He was a person whom highly valued his reputation, and the suspicion of child molestation caused immense psychological pressure. He visited his daughter in Novocherkassk, drinking and confessing his innocence while crying. On January 8, his daughter found him dead. Whether rumors or a conflict with his daughter caused his suicide remains unclear. A week after Yelena's murder, a new development occurred. A neighbor of Kravchenko reported a theft. Police searched Kravchenko's house and found the neighbor's belongings in the attic. Kravchenko was arrested and confessed to the theft, admitting he'd burglarized the neighbor's home while they were away. However, investigating the theft, police noticed Kravchenko was linked to 2 other cases within a month, raising suspicions about his involvement in Yelena's murder. Although Kravchenko had an alibi, police doubted its validity. They re-interviewed Kravchenko's friend and wife. The friend's testimony remained unchanged. Kravchenko's wife initially repeated her previous statement, but fearing implication for covering up a crime, she admitted Kravchenko didn't return home at 6:15 p.m. on the day Yelena disappeared, but rather after 8:00 p.m., and that he was drunk. With this new testimony, Kravchenko was arrested. On February 16th, under psychological pressure, he confessed to killing Yelena and wrote a detailed statement. He stated that after drinking, he sat on a bench at the bus stop. A bus arrived, and 5 or 6 people got off, including a young girl who approached him for directions. Intoxicated, Kravchenko claimed he didn't remember what happened until he awoke near the river, the girl lying motionless and bloodied on the ground. Realizing he'd killed her, he panicked, used her scarf to cover her eyes, threw her body in the river, cleaned himself, and went home. A month later, Kravchenko unexpectedly changed his statement, claiming the previous confession was coerced and maintaining his innocence. For the next month, he repeatedly changed his plea. In August of the same year, he again confessed to murdering Yelena. The Rostov court found Kravchenko guilty of murder and sentenced him to death. He pleaded not guilty and appealed. After 3 years, the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union upheld the original verdict. In July 1983, Kravchenko was executed, officially closing the Yelena Zakhanova case. However, similar tragedies continued in Rostov. In September 1983, Rostov police investigated 6 murders between June 1982 and August 1983, suspecting a single serial killer. The victims were 13-year-old Lyubov Biryuk, 19-year-old Irina Karabelnikova, 10-year-old Olga Stalmachinok, 14-year-old Lyubov Volobueva, 7-year-old Igor Gudkov, and 15-year-old Sergei Kuzmin. The bodies were found in various locations: Donskoy, Shakhty, Novoshakhtinsk, and rural areas along the Don River. All victims had similar wounds to the head and upper body, inflicted by a sharp object. Lacking leads, police suspected a mentally ill perpetrator and arrested a man exhibiting erratic behavior in a Rostov garage. This man shows signs of intellectual disability. After being arrested, he confessed that he and another intellectually disabled friend had stolen a car and then killed a child. The police continued to arrest the suspect's friend, who also admitted to the theft and murder. However, when the police asked about other cases, the 2 men started speaking incoherently and gave inaccurate descriptions of the crime scene. The information they provided about the victim's appearance and the crime scene did not match the case files. They even confessed to other crimes that occurred while they were in custody. The police then arrested several of the 2 suspects' classmates, who were students at a vocational school for people with intellectual disabilities. However, due to communication difficulties, the investigation made little progress. The police jokingly referred to the case as the case of the idiots, believing these individuals were not the real culprits. During the investigation, the police found more evidence of a serial killer at various locations around Rostov. On the bodies of the new victims, in addition to stab wounds, There were common features such as the removal of the tongue or nipples, and the victims' ages were no longer limited to those under 20. The oldest victim was a 44-year-old woman. Over time, the number of cases increased, and the police gathered more clues. In January 1984, near the railway station in the Oktyabrski district of Rostov-on-Don, the police discovered the body of a 14-year-old boy, stabbed over 70 times. His genitalia had been removed, and semen was found in his anus. 3 months later, the police found a shoe print at the scene of another crime, suspected to be the killer's. A friend of the victim said she had seen him talking to a tall, thin man wearing glasses and a hat at a bus stop near the school. Because the man wore glasses and a hat, the girl could not see his face clearly. In September 1984, one evening, 2 undercover police officers were patrolling the bus stop near Aviators Park, where 7 previous victims had been discovered. The officers suspected the killer might return to the scene, and in the crowd, they noticed a man about 45 years old, 1.8 meters tall, thin, wearing glasses, and carrying a black leather briefcase. Aside from not wearing a hat, the other features matched the sketch of the serial killer previously released by the police. The man's behavior seemed suspicious. He didn't appear to be waiting for a bus, so the 2 officers decided to follow him. A bus to the airport arrived, and the man blended into the crowd and boarded. The officers followed him. Once on the bus, the man began talking to a girl sitting next to him, but she did not respond enthusiastically. After receiving no reply, the man fell silent but continued to watch her. As the bus continued to pick up more passengers, suddenly, a woman screamed that she was being harassed. The woman pointed at the man and angrily accused him of touching her thigh. There was a heated argument, and other passengers confirmed they had witnessed the harassment. The man accused of harassment was the one the undercover officers were following. Realizing he couldn't deny it, the man quickly got off at the next stop. The officers discreetly followed him, and the man continued wandering in a busy area, boarded other bus, possibly to avoid being recognized. He sat next to another girl and tried to strike up a conversation, but she didn't respond. At the next stop, the girl stood up to get off, and the man rushed to follow her, but was too late as she ran away. The man continued wandering the streets, with the 2 officers keeping a distance. They noticed he seemed aimless, often approaching and talking to women. Late into the night, he went to a bus stop to rest and even sought out prostitutes. After tracking him overnight, the officers knew his movements and prepared to arrest him. The next morning, the man took a bus to the Central Market. The officers immediately approached and arrested him. When they checked his briefcase, they found an ID card for Andrei Chikatilo, a 51-year-old man, along with a dirty towel, a bar of soap, a .20 chem knife, 2 coils of rope, and a bottle of Vaseline. These were unusual items for a normal person to carry. When the police questioned him about them, Chikatilo calmly explained that he worked as a clerk at a construction materials factory. The rope was used for tying crates, the knife for cutting rope, and the Vaseline for shaving while traveling for work. The towel and soap were for personal hygiene. Although Chikatilo's explanation seemed reasonable, the officers still felt suspicious based on their surveillance. While in detention, Chikatilo was placed in the same cell with 2 other men, who were actually undercover officers planted to extract information and confirm whether he was the wanted serial killer. The 3 men quickly became friendly and started talking openly. Chikatilo admitted that he liked young women and would visit Donless Koz, or the rural areas along the Don River 2 or 3 times a month to find a partner. When asked about the serial killer, Chikatilo seemed uninterested and said he would let the police investigate. During their conversation, when Chikatilo learned one of his cellmates was a doctor, he became very enthusiastic about medical knowledge. The entire conversation between the three men was under police surveillance. Although Chikatilo did not confess, his characteristics strongly matched the information that the police had gathered about the serial killer. To confirm, investigators took a blood sample from Chikatilo and compared it with semen samples collected from the crime scenes. However, at that time, DNA testing technology was not yet in use. Forensic experts could only analyze and compare blood type antigens. The results showed that Chikatilo had blood type AI, while the semen found at the crime scenes belonged to blood group AB. Since the results did not match, Chikatilo was cleared and released. Up to October 1984, the police had discovered a total of 23 victims related to the serial killer, including 4 boys between 10 and 14 years old. The genital organs of the victims were all removed or showed signs of being attacked, and the analysis of the wounds on the victims' bodies, especially the stab wounds on the lower abdomen, suggested that the perpetrator was likely a person with a medical background and deviant sexual tendencies. However, the murders continued to occur, causing horror and fear among the people, who were worried that they or their family members would become the next victims. In August 1985, in the Domodedovo forest, Moscow, the police discovered another murder case with signs of the serial killer. The victim was an 18-year-old girl with her hands tied tightly around her neck and chest and 38 stab wounds. The cause of death was determined to be suffocation, and the time of death was about 3 days prior. The police reviewed the entire flight schedule between Moscow and Rostov in recent times, but did not find anything unusual. People gave the serial killer many nicknames, such as Rostov Butcher and Red Ripper. In December 1985, due to the seriousness of the case, the Soviet government launched a large-scale operation called Lesopolosa, or Forest Strip, deploying a large number of personnel to investigate, and many people volunteered to support the police. Helicopters were deployed to patrol the air above the forest area, and undercover police officers were stationed at bus stations and public places, disguised as workers, farmers, and even homeless people, to monitor suspicious individuals. A year went by, and the Lesopolosa operation still did not yield any results, although the number of murders with signs of the serial killer had decreased. The bodies of the victims found were all in a state of severe decomposition, indicating that the time of the crime had been quite long. 2 years after the launch of the Lesopolosa operation, the police arrested another serial killer in Rostov named Anatoly Slivko, who had raped and murdered 4 students in Bataysk. After committing the crime, Slivko even created fake crime scenes to frame the Rostov butcher. However, Slivko had taken the victim's property, which was different from the Rostov butcher's modus operandi. Less than a year after being caught, Slivko was sentenced to death, while the Lesopolosa operation continued. The portrait of the Rostov butcher gradually became clearer, a male between 45 and 50 years old, with no signs of mental illness or intellectual disability, having a stable family and job, possibly related to transportation or having a personal vehicle. He appeared to be a normal person, tall and thin, with a trustworthy appearance, easily gaining the trust of naive people. Although there were male victims, the police believed that the perpetrator was likely a person with deviant sexual tendencies, who satisfied his sexual needs by witnessing the suffering of the victims. It was possible that the perpetrator had been abused or had bad experiences in the past, which led him to commit such brutal acts, often removing the genital organs of the victims. In November 1990, a seemingly dead-end investigation gained new momentum when Rostov police received a tip from a local resident. While mushroom hunting in the forest, near a village in Krasnosolinsky district, he discovered a woman's body, identified as 22-year-old Svetlana Korostik. Witnesses reported seeing Svetlana talking to a tall man at a bus stop earlier. The autopsy revealed she died from acute blood loss about a week prior, with multiple stab wounds matching previous cases attributed to the Rostov Ripper. At the nearby station, a patrol officer recalled stopping a suspicious man for an ID check a week earlier. The man, wearing an oddly formal suit for mushroom picking, identified himself as Chikatilo. The officer let him go after a brief document check, only later realizing this was the same Chikatilo who had been detained 6 years prior. Police began surveillance on Chikatilo on November 17, 1990. For 3 days, they observed him approaching lone individuals after work hours. On the 4th day, after visiting a clinic for an X-ray and finger bandaging, he was arrested while attempting to engage with a young person. A search of Chikatilo's residence uncovered 23 knives, a hammer, and shoes matching prints from crime scenes 6 years earlier. After 7 days of silence following his arrest, Chikatilo broke down upon seeing the psychological profile police had created. He confessed to additional murders across multiple regions, revealing the total exceeded police estimates. Significantly, he admitted to being responsible for Yelena Zakatnova's murder 12 years prior, a case for which another person had been wrongfully executed. Chikatilo provided detailed accounts of his crimes, including his first murder of Yelena Zakatnova in December 1978, where he lured the 9-year-old using the promise of foreign chewing gum, a rare commodity at the time. This case had wrongly led to the conviction and execution of Kravchenko. From then on, all of Chikatilo's crimes stemmed from his desire to recreate the extreme excitement he experienced during his first murder. His methods were similar. He would often use food to lure victims, sometimes approaching vulnerable individuals in isolated places. He engaged in disturbing acts, including taking parts of victims home to eat them. This compulsive behavior increasingly controlled him, making him unable to stop. In 1984, at age 48, Chikatilo claimed the most victims in a single year, 15 people. He was arrested that year, but due to limitations in forensic technology at the time and discrepancies in blood type testing, he was released. Some experts suggested rare cases where blood types could vary in different samples, while others believed sample contamination led to inaccurate results. He later served 3 months of a 1-year sentence for theft before early release for good behavior. In late 1985, during Operation Lesopolosa, Chikatilo even volunteered to help police at train stations. He took satisfaction in watching the unsuccessful investigation, though he became more cautious. He committed no crimes in 1986, and in 1987 only struck 3 times while traveling for work outside Rostov, leading police to wrongly believe he had stopped. Perhaps even Chikatilo himself didn't expect that just going for a medical checkup and buying some beer would put him in police sights. The Rostov Ripper case officially closed after Chikatilo's arrest. Notably, during the Lesopolosa operation, police solved 1,062 unrelated cases, including 95 murders, 140 assaults, and 245 rapes. The operation cost totaled 10 million rubles. After the Rostov Ripper's capture, the public was shocked and outraged. Many wondered what turned him into such a cold-blooded, depraved killer. To answer this, let's look back to his birth. In October 1936, Chikatilo was born to poor farmers in a small village in Sumy, Ukraine. His parents were collective farm workers living off the land. The country had just endured war and famine, and his family often went hungry. In his confession, Andrei Chikatilo, claimed to have witnessed a traumatic event that haunted him for the rest of his life. He alleged that he saw his mother kidnap and cannibalize a neighboring child. Chikatilo's father was captured and imprisoned during the war when he was 6-year-old, and their humble home was razed by the fascist invaders. 2 years later, his sister Tatiana was born. At age 8, Chikatilo started school. Though he loved learning, his weak physique made him a target for bullies. At home, his father was gentle, contrasting with his strict mother, who frequently scolded both children. As the family's finances improved, Chikatilo focused more on education. However, during puberty, he discovered he had physiological problems. At 17, he fell in love but was too insecure about his condition to confess. Once, after accidentally knocking down his sister's friend who struggled to get free, but he was ejaculation when she writhed in his arm, which made him felt a sense of release. After failing to enter Moscow State University, he worked briefly before enrolling in a technical school for communications. At 19, he had a relationship that lasted 18 months before ending due to his condition. After graduating and working in Shakhty while studying engineering, he joined the military. At 24, after 3 years of service, he returned home and had another failed relationship due to his condition. This time, his problem became public knowledge, making him a laughingstock. No woman would date him, driving him to near suicide, though family and friends helped him recover. At age 27, Chikatilo was introduced by his sister to her 24-year-old friend Feodosia Odnachieva, whom he married. After marriage, Chikatilo studied Russian language at Rostov University. The couple had 2 children, a daughter, Ludmila, and a son, Yuri. After graduating, Chikatilo became a teacher at a boarding school in Novoshakhtinsk. However, his concerning behavior emerged during his teaching. He would use lessons as opportunities to harm students and even broke into student dormitories. Though fired, he quickly found another education job where the concerning behavior continued. In August 1991, he underwent psychiatric evaluation to determine legal competency. 2 months later, results showed he had borderline personality disorder with sadistic tendencies, but was legally competent to stand trial. His trial opened in Rostov court in April 1992. He exhibited bizarre behaviors, shouting, removing clothes, and claiming to be pregnant. Initially charged with 56 murders, evidence supported 52 counts, later reduced to 43 due to appeals. The 6-month trial ended in October 1992 with a death sentence. His appeals and request for presidential pardon were rejected. On February 14, 1994, at age 58, Chikatilo was executed by firing squad at Novocherkassk prison. His wife Feodosia, who divorced him after his arrest, struggled to believe her quiet husband's crimes. She faced threats and had to relocate with her daughter. Ludmila had cut contact with her father earlier after discovering concerning behavior toward Yuri. Only Yuri defended his father, though Yuri himself had legal troubles for theft. Before Chikatilo's arrest, Yuri was detained by the police for robbery, along with his accomplices, for stealing $10,000 worth of property. To save her son, Faina had to sell almost everything in their home, and ultimately, Yuri was sentenced to 2 years in prison. The case remains one of the 20th century's most notorious and highlighted issues in the Soviet justice system's investigative capabilities at the time. It serves as a reminder about hidden criminals living among ordinary people. The family was ostracized and had to relocate to rebuild their lives. While the case of the Rostov Ripper has been closed, its haunting legacy continues to linger over Russia. Chikatilo's death cannot compensate for the loss and suffering he inflicted on the victims' families. The story of Andrei Chikatilo serves as a stark reminder of the unseen nature of crime and the importance of crime prevention. It also highlights the shortcomings of the Soviet judicial system at the time, where outdated investigative techniques and inefficiencies allowed a cold-blooded killer like Chikatilo to evade justice for so long. Even after all these years, the people of Rostov cannot forget the horror that the Rostov Ripper inflicted upon them. His story continues to be told as a reminder of the harsh reality that sometimes evil lurks beneath the surface of ordinary people living among us.